good evening, Soundside Church. Pastor Aaron coming to you and to your community group in particular. Tonight, we are continuing our series called Before You Share. And as we've said in previous weeks, we are actually going through this little book called Before You Share Your Faith, 5 Ways to Be Evangelism Ready by Matt Smethurst. Tonight, we are in chapter 3 of Before You Share Your Faith. And what we're learning tonight is that before we can share our faith with someone, we have to love the lost. That's our subject for tonight. Love the lost. In chapter 1, we learned that before we share our faith, we have to have our own grasp of the gospel. And then last session, we talked about the fact that before we share our faith, we need to check our context, understand who we're talking to. And tonight, we need to make sure that we love the lost. Now, one of the things the author does here at the start of the chapter is he says, in an ordinary book, you would think that we would address our fear of sharing our faith before addressing loving the lost. And he says, actually, he's found in his own life, and I would agree with him, that loving the lost precedes overcoming fear. And one of the reasons for that is a little dynamic that shows up in 1 John chapter 4, where we learn that perfect love casts out fear. And yeah, the context is a little different in 1 John chapter 4, but it is very difficult to love someone you're afraid of. Did you catch that? If we're afraid of somebody, it's going to be very hard to love them. And love is something that God produces in us. Love precedes fear. Love casts out fear, which is why we're going to spend tonight talking about loving the lost. And it's not hard to do because we just have to look at the life of Jesus. Jesus said in Luke 19:10 that he came to seek and to save that which was lost. And in his ministry, he was accused by the religious leaders of being a, catch this, friend of sinners. I mean, how dare he be a friend of sinners? That was his reputation. I think it's safe to say that for all the sermons Jesus preached on mountainsides, he practiced a form of friendship evangelism. Now, it would be a stretch to say that he befriended every person that he spoke the gospel to, surely, but the way he approached people was from a posture of love, to share with them something out of love. And so the idea of friendship evangelism is one we shouldn't be afraid of. The idea that we can build a relationship with somebody for the sake of sharing the gospel. Now, we have to avoid 2 ditches. That's the author's words here. Avoid 2 ditches when it comes to friendship evangelism. The first is ignoring friendship entirely. That's not to say you can't share the gospel with perfect strangers. You can, and there are good opportunities to do that. But we shouldn't treat people like projects. The idea being that my goal is to share my faith. I don't care who they are. Okay? And I'll be honest with you, I've done that and to mixed and uncertain results. One of the ways I was trained to share my faith was basically as a sales pitch. The other person didn't come into it at all except for somebody that I was trying to win as a convert. And I really do believe that perhaps the Lord used my well-intentioned but misguided efforts in a few cases, but I would not recommend that pattern of behavior. Treating somebody like a project, like I've just got to get a little hash mark, paint a little symbol on the fuselage of my fighter plane. Good night. No. But there's another ditch, okay? Not just, treating people as projects is the one ditch, but treating our relationship as an idol is the other ditch. And what do I mean by that? I mean that I will not dare upset my relationship with this person by sharing the gospel. The comfort that I have with this person is something that I dare not disrupt, which means my comfort level becomes more important than God's commission, which is essentially putting an idol in God's place there. The point is, you can build a relationship with somebody for 40 years and never share the gospel with them. That's not what we mean. Of course, we advocate checking your context. We advocate listening to people. But we are not saying that you should treat people like projects, and we are not saying that you should just establish a really comfortable relationship that you're afraid to mess up. Because, like we said, if we love people, we want to share our faith with them. And that's honestly what we're stressing tonight. Love is not a strategy for sharing the gospel, okay? And it may come across that way. In fact, the way I've already said it tonight might be misunderstood. If I say, build a relationship with somebody so that you can share the gospel with them, that almost sounds a little bit mercenary, doesn't it? It sounds like love is just a strategy. Well, when love becomes a strategy, it's not really love, is it? And it's a cliche. He quotes it in the book, and he says it's a cliche. People don't care what you know until they know you care. One of my favorite books, Instruments in the Redeemer's Hands by Paul Tripp, says that when we try to guide people and try to help them, especially in a counseling situation, we always start with love. Love, know, speak, do. And it's a whole thing. But the idea is they got to know you love them before they're willing to listen to what you have to say. Actually, they have to know that you love them before they're willing to share with you what you need to know about them so that you can speak what they need to hear. Well, love is actually a litmus test of whether we know God. So it's not a strategy, it's a test, okay? I don't love because that's the best way I can win them. I love because that's the outflow of God's relationship with me. 1 Corinthians 13 is going to be a great study for us tonight on what that actually looks like. But if I could just finish this little video with just a couple of reminders also from this chapter. He heads it by saying, when you love people, make sure you mind your manners. Mind your manners. No, we are not affirming people in their sin. That's not loving. But also, we are not mimicking our world's posture of becoming outraged at anything we disagree with. We can take a stand against people's sin in a way that is very worldly. Our world basically says if you disagree with something, they're the enemy, and you got to prosecute them, and you got to, make all sorts of, extreme pronouncements online, and gripe about people when you're in an in-group. No, that's the way the world does things, okay? We don't need to mimic the outrage machine. You say, but I'm a truth teller. Maybe you're just a jerk. I don't know. None of you are jerks, of course. Of course. But you say, well, Aaron, the Bible says we're supposed to speak the truth in love. Yes, it does, and I love what he says here. The Bible does not say that speaking the truth is love. I think some people get confused. Like, as long as I'm speaking the truth, it's the loving thing to do. Not so much. We're to speak the truth in love. I'm loving this person and nobody has any doubt. And in the context of that love, I speak truth. If I don't speak truth, there is no love. But just speaking truth, that doesn't make it loving. Okay, finally, the last thing is something we talked about last week, and that is let's just make sure we're listening well. Let's make sure we're listening, okay? Listen to them because that's one of the best ways of showing that we actually care about them. He concludes the chapter with a quote by a very famous atheist, and I'm actually going to have your community group leader read that to you, and I think it'll provoke some discussion. It's very interesting, provoked my thoughts anyway. But as we go into our discussion groups tonight, let's learn what it means to love the lost. May the Lord use that love to get the truth to those who need to hear it. I'll turn things over to your community group leader now.